And so I'm going to have Joe, just for a few minutes, talk about what did Danville's redevelopment agency do for us in Danville? How do we have such a beautiful downtown? What projects were funded by it? And as a result of the dissolution of redevelopment agencies, although we're still trying to learn all of the details as to what we'll be able to do and what we won't, where do we go from here?
Okay, well thank you, Mayor. I know that one of the things that gets people really excited first thing in the morning over that first cup of coffee is to talk about local government finance. So I didn't want to disappoint all of you that came out here this morning with that expectation. As the Mayor said, last June, the state legislature and the governor passed two pieces of legislation that were intended to do two things. One piece of legislation was intended to eliminate redevelopment agencies in the state of California as they currently exist. The second piece of legislation, which was a companion piece of legislation, was intended to allow cities to keep their redevelopment agencies if they were willing to make voluntary monetary contributions to the state of California for the remaining life of the agency. So we like to refer to that one as the extortion piece of legislation. By way of background, as you're all aware, the state has had some significant fiscal challenges for the last several years. And those have been due in large part to the economy, and they've been aggravated by the lack of an ability to enact bipartisan fiscal solutions up there in Sacramento. In November of 2010, the voters of the state of California passed Proposition 22, which was a measure that was intended to protect local government revenues because the state had previously come back and withheld revenues from local governments when they were having problems trying to balance their budget. So let me talk very briefly about redevelopment. What happened with redevelopment was the state enacted these two pieces of legislation. In light of those laws, our town council spent quite a bit of time in the second half of last year looking at all of the possible solutions and making sure that Danville was positioned as best it could be. Very quickly, the way redevelopment works, redevelopment was enacted by state law back in the 1950s, and property tax is distributed at a local level among a number of different agencies or taxing entities. In Danville, typically there are about 20 different taxing entities that receive a portion of the property tax. Largest portion of the property tax goes to education. That would be our local school district, community college district, county superintendent of schools. Second largest slice of the property tax pie here would go to our local fire district. Third largest slice would go to Contra Costa County, and so on down the line until it all adds up to 100%. Redevelopment is a tool that essentially lets you freeze that tax rate where it is the day that the agency is created, and growth in property tax from that point on goes to the redevelopment agency. Okay? So what's the redevelopment agency supposed to do? Well, when you form the agency, you adopt a plan, you identify a specific series of steps that you're going to take, and they are intended to eliminate blight and improve your project area. In Danville, our project area goes from Diablo Road to Hartz, from the south edge of the high school down to Boone Court, from Railroad Avenue over to Front Street. It's about 140 acres in all. It's not a large area. It's what people generally characterize as Old Town Danville. Okay? The agency was formed in 1986. It was scheduled to run through 2026, 40 years. So we're roughly 2/3 of the way through the life of the agency. When agencies are formed, the idea is you go out and you put those improvements in the ground as quickly as you can. So you borrow the money or you bond for the money to do it. Well, what have we done in the last 25 years? Well, those of you and some of you in the room I know have been around for 25 years. Remember the old Charlotte Woods School site on Front Street where the library and the community center are? There were redevelopment funds that went into the town's contribution to working with the school district to relocate Charlotte Woods School, build a new library and community center. The old Danville home improvement site that used to sit over where Iron Horse Plaza is now. Railroad Square, Danville Square, up on the north end of the downtown. We've been in a position to facilitate and work with private developers to see some nice projects come along that have really enhanced the vibrancy of our downtown. In addition to that, we've been able to use redevelopment funds to provide for a whole lot of additional free public parking, beautification improvements, extending Railroad Avenue from where it used to end at Linda Mesa north to Danville Boulevard. So all in all, over 25 years, the agency has invested over $50 million in the project area. That's $50 million that the town wouldn't have had to spend without having that tool available. Right now, the agency receives about $2.5 million a year. It's a little less than 10%, an amount that's a little less than 10% of what our total operating budget would be. So, when people say to me, well, gosh, I'm looking around downtown Danville, I don't see a whole lot of blight here, why do you need redevelopment? My answer to them is, step back in time to 1986 and take a look at what it looked like then, and contrast that against what it looks like now, and you'll see what redevelopment has been able to do here locally. So what happens now moving forward is that as of February 1st, because of the outcome of the Supreme Court case that Candace described, what the Supreme Court did is they took that second measure, the extortion measure, as I referred to it, and they said that's unconstitutional under Prop 22. You can't take money away from redevelopment agencies or alter that formula. However, the first piece of legislation, which does away with redevelopment agencies altogether, state you do have the ability to enact that legislation because you're not altering the funding formula. Redevelopment agencies were legislatively created, and they can be legislatively dissolved. And it's a 90-page long decision, but basically in the first 4 pages, that's what it says. And February 1st is the cutoff date. So what does that mean for Danville moving forward? Well, what it means is that other projects, another project that I forgot to mention was the Sycamore Place housing project down on Laurel Drive, the 74-unit project that was built for seniors here. Put a lot of our housing money into that because 20% of the funds that flow to redevelopment agencies need to be spent to provide for housing within the project area. So what does that mean moving forward? Well, it means a couple of things. One, the good news, if you will, is that even though agencies are dissolved, the successor entities will be able to continue to receive funds to meet the debt service obligations that they currently have outstanding. So to the extent that funds have been borrowed to make all of these various improvements, we will continue to receive funds to meet those debt service obligations, and it won't place any additional burden on the town or require us to utilize general fund tax dollars to do that. In terms of lost opportunity moving forward, well, about 1/3 of the life of the agency was remaining, and about 1/3 of the tax increment dollars were remaining. That's plus or minus $20 million in lost opportunity. People have asked me, well, what projects aren't going to be funded because of that? And my honest answer to them has been that with respect to some of these pay-as-you-go projects, not all of those dollars have been programmed yet. There are other improvements that the town wants to make along Railroad Avenue with beautification improvements, bulb outs, trying to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment as we've done along Harts Avenue. That certainly would have been a candidate to use redevelopment funds. There is undergrounding of overhead utility lines that is remaining to be done within the downtown that certainly would have been a candidate to utilize some of those funds. And other opportunities to create public-private partnerships to see some older, more rundown properties perhaps redeveloped and revitalized. So that's what we're talking about in terms of lost opportunity. moving forward, what's going to happen is there will be these successor agencies that will be created, oversight agencies, and each redevelopment area in the state is going to have a successor agency, and that successor agency is going to make sure that we liquidate all of our assets and that they maximize the amount of revenue that will be flowing to the underlying taxing entities. So basically, redevelopment goes away. We revert back to whatever the underlying tax allocation formula is. What that means for us is that education will be getting a bigger slice of that pie, but I don't think that education or the town or anybody else thinks that they're going to get to keep it, because the state is basically then going to say, you're getting that additional money from redevelopment, so it's that much less money that we need to give you, because in the end, all of this was envisioned as being a way that the state could help bridge its budget gap. So I think as of yesterday, the governor came out with his budget. They're looking at a $9.6 billion gap in 12-13. This is going to provide them less than $1 billion to help bridge that gap. So good news for Danville is that a great deal of what we set out to accomplish through redevelopment has been accomplished. The bad news is there was more work to do, and you know, if there was $20 million of tax increment left, there's not $20 million laying around in a pot someplace else. It's going to be used to replace that money. Those projects either won't get done in the future, or we're going to have to rely a lot more on private investment to get those done. But that's where things stand.